Hi, good evening all. Most welcome everyone here, please. I'm Dr. Mudit Bansal, veterinary surgeon, ophthalmologist, director of Netralok Retina Clinic in Satellite. At the outset, I really sincerely would want to thank DPS and for the great initiative that they have taken, even in this lockdown period, to give this online awareness programs. And so this is one of those such programs where me and my wife, Dr. Sushma Bansal, would try to concisely cover up the issues of me myself would be taking up the eye strain issue, the digital eye strain. And to begin with, how does it really arise? Now in this scenario, in this critical scenario, when we are all of us are trying to keep ourselves safe by staying indoors. Some issues that really crop up in day-to-day life is, now since we are at home from morning to evening to night, so one of the issues that comes up is a proper utilization of time. And although there would be some activities which one can indulge himself into, but at the end of the day, when we really analyze, we come to realize that a significant part of the day has gone by in front of the screens. Those screens could be computers, they could be desktops, laptops, they could be smartphones, they could be tablets, they could be e-reading. So now this is something which doesn't happen immediately. Say, for example, if I'm in front of a screen, I'm in front of the screen for say half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, say, taking an example of that way. So it's not something that is going to give me discomfort right there and then. And so I should not be under the misconception that nothing is happening to my eyes, or my eyes are really strong enough to bear the brunt of what everyone say as the the nuances of digital media. So what exactly is digital eye strain? What really happens to us, or what really happens to the eye? So I think this is not a very uncommon finding. So many times in our clinics we do see people coming across, people coming over with the complaints of in layman or in general words, if I were to say, heaviness of the eyes, straining of the eyes. You feel good while keeping your eyes closed. You have this heaviness of the head, mostly more for the frontal. There is some itchiness, dryness, or grittiness kind of a feeling. Mostly to cover up all the things, you feel that your eyes are a little tired, they're a little heavy. And when you look back, you would come to, when we ask the leading questions, what were you really doing when this was happening? So it would generally come to us that either they were in front of some screen, which could be a television or anything, for a prolonged period of time. At times they do say it has happened after prolonged reading, but that is something which we encounter very less. It's more so after a prolonged screen exposure. And when this exposure, so as I was telling you earlier, it's not something that would happen immediately. If I'm in front of a screen today for say 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, not something that I would start feeling these symptoms on day one. It's something which is cumulative. So if I'm constantly in front of the screen for the number of days ahead, so it's the number of hours that are adding on, and ultimately it would eventually land me up in some of these symptoms. So what exactly would be the cause or the reasons for a person developing eye strain? Would everyone develop it? Would some develop it? Are there any ways to really prevent it? So of course the number one reason for developing eye strain is the number of hours which when you are in front of the screen. So but it would not be practical or wise or prudent on us to advise anyone to be away from the screen totally, because that would be a very impractical suggestion. So considering that this is something which cannot be taken off the table, the screens can never go off, they are here and they would be there always. So you cannot really ask someone to stop the screen viewing. So now if someone is on screen viewing, so what are the additional things that could predispose you to these digital eye strain, the term that we use, the digital eye strain? So there's a normal physiology that whenever we are reading something, or whenever we are concentrating on a particular thing, which could be a TV, which could be computer, which could be smartphones, or in fact it could be just reading also. So if you notice, as I'm talking to you, my eyes are constantly blinking. Normally we would say, for example, if we are in normal situations, we would be blinking our eyes for about say 20-25 times in a minute. So it's a normal human tendency when you are in front of, when you're concentrating on a particular thing, the blinking frequency goes down. Now the effect of blinking is to keep your eyes lubricated, to keep your eyes wet. So when you're not blinking, supposing over a constant exposure, when you're concentrating on something, the blinking goes down, say from 20 to 10, or say about it goes down to 50% or so. So the basic mechanism is that the black part of the eyes that you see in me, this is the cornea. It's actually transparent. The black is because of the iris which is behind it. So it's like a glass to the entry of the eye. So when you're blinking, it's the glass is getting lubricated, or the glass is getting spontaneously cleaned, which is a normal physiological mechanism of the eye to take care of itself. So now when you're not blinking enough, when the frequency is reduced, which happens when you're concentrating on a particular thing, so what is happening is that the lubrication on that glass is not happening. The glass is not getting clean, the cornea is not getting clean, and it eventually leads to dryness. So corneal dryness, how you can understand is that the glass becomes a little foggy, there's a fogginess on the glass. So if you have a foggy glass, how do you clean it? You just wipe it with a wet cloth or something. So similarly, if your cornea is getting dry, the only way to take care of it is to blink the eyes, because that is what something which will form a tear film over the cornea and prevent from dryness. So the blinking becomes less. Secondly, the reasons are the other reasons are the lighting from the device itself. Either it could be too bright, either it could be too dull, the contrast issues, the background could be too bright, too white a background, or the background at times people keep the screen too dull. So whichever the settings which is bringing you strain on your eyes, which is something which nobody needs to tell. There are no set parameters that this should be the brightness that you want to keep 40%, 50%, 70%, or this much, this would be the lighting or the contrast that you would want to keep. Anything that is producing strain on your eyes, it's a way of eyes telling you, or the body telling you that this is not correct for itself. So you need to adjust those settings. The glare, at times there's the glare on the screen. Now glare is from two places. It's there from the screen itself, like as if I'm sitting here in front of the screen. There's some glare which is coming right out of the screen, and plus there is this glare which is coming from the surrounding lightings, the overhead lightings, the ceiling lights, the if you're sitting close to say a window or some place, and there's this extensive sunlight that is coming in. So now you're exposed to two kinds of lights. One is something which is coming from the screen itself, from the device itself, and secondly the reflections of the surrounding light, the overhead light, or the reflections from the surrounding area. So that adds to the strain, because if the lighting is not matched properly, then the eyes would would tend to strain more. Either you would want to squeeze your eyes, the pupils would constrict, your inner muscles would accommodate or constrict in order to get a proper focus. So the glare of the device itself as well as the overhead lightings need to be taken care of, which we'll come to shortly. Another important thing is the viewing distance. How close or how distant we are from the device that we are on, which would be different for a computer setting, for a laptop setting, and which would be different for smartphones. For TVs, mostly the standard room settings for a distant vision are okay. If someone is sitting very close, so you're going with a chair in front of the television set and trying to see it, it's something which is not advisable. Anything which about 10 feet or more is okay for watching television, but it is different for computers and the phone devices, which we'll just come into. Secondly is the posture, which is something which is very important. You tend to make yourself comfortable when you are using any device for a prolonged period of time. Like you would slump in the chair, you might lie down, you might lean forward, come close to the screen to make the like the screens. There's some alphabets coming on the screen, so if I were to look at it from this distance, if I'm not seeing it clearly, if I come very close, then again I'm putting more strain to my eyes. So poor seating posture has to be very good. Again, we'll do that shortly. So one of the other things, important thing is people do tend to ask us that the radiations, are there any radiations coming out of the screen? So I wouldn't call it, wouldn't really term the name radiation, but yes, there are lights, of course, which are coming out of it, and these devices, we have this visible spectrum where we have these different colors, red, blue, green, and all those things which we know, Vibgyor, the 7 colors. These devices, generally most of the devices emanate blue color more. We don't realize it, we're not seeing anything blue, but it's the spectrum of the visible light. So it's blue light more. And if you would look at the light spectrum, it is closer to the ultraviolet radiation. Again, I'm saying this is not a radiation, it's not a radiation injury to the eyes, but it's the blue light is closer to the ultraviolet radiation. And these ultraviolet radiations, over a prolonged exposure, mostly it is age dependent. This doesn't really apply to children, but to adults, overexposure to these ultraviolet rays brings in about some retinal macular degenerations or early onset of cataract. So this is something which is a part of the visible spectrum. Again, no radiations coming out of it, but the part of the visible spectrum is more towards the blue light, which is probably a little less friendly as compared to the other rays of the visible spectrum. So now that we know that, now that I know that I have a digital, I have eye strain. Eye strain is a general term, and the word in front of it, the digital, that is telling us the reason of eye strain. So eye strain is general. In this case, it is digital. So now that I have come to know that this is a digital eye strain, I have identified myself as the symptoms that are there. These, again, to recapture the symptoms, what they could be would heaviness of the eye, grittiness of the eye, foreign body sensation, you feel your eyes are heavy, you feel like closing the eyes, or when you're sitting in fan or in AC, you feel that it's something which is hurting you, the blow of the air is hurting you. So all these are signs of eye strain and the dryness which is being caused by overexposure. Again, as I said, it would not be a very wise advice to stop the screen exposure totally, which is something not practical. So now that we have this thing which has to be there, the screen time has to be there. So what can we really do to prevent these side effects from happening? Before I go into it, I would want to tell that this is one condition for which the treatment is prevention. As there is no solid medical therapy for the cure of this particular condition. So as the norma that we say, prevention is better than cure, this fits into it very thoroughly and very properly. So how do we prevent it? Rather, in fact, I would not really use the term how do we treat it. I would say the best way is to prevent it from happening. Again, the first advice would be to limit the number of hours of screen exposure. If someone is there in front of the screen for a longer duration of time, so medically it is advised that if you are to be there on the screen for prolonged periods, so you need to take a gap of 15 minutes to 30 minutes every 2 hours. Again, this is for the people who are professionally involved in screen exposure, laptops and all, but this does not really does not give you the license to be in front of televisions or phones or other digital media that till 2 hours it is safe, and if you're going above 2 hours it's unsafe. So to minimize the exposure, screen exposure is the foremost precautionary step. Take a break of about say 15 to 30 minutes every 2 hours. The second rule is the code is 20-20-20. So what it exactly means is that if you are in front of the screen, say supposing I'm in front of the screen right now, so after 20 minutes I should be taking a break of 20 seconds. It does not mean I sit with my eyes closed. I just need to take myself out of the screen. I just need to gaze out of the screen. Say supposing if I'm in front of the screen right now, my 20 minutes are done. So what I would do is I would just take my gaze out of the screen and I would look ahead for 20 seconds. So 20-20-20, what it means is 20 minutes of screen time, 20 seconds of gap time, and the third 20 is to look away at 20 feet. So you're really not counting the 20 feet. The crux is to look away at a distant objects, something. So this is to relax the particular set of muscles which are involved in close viewing of the screen. As we were discussing, now we're looking at trying to blunt the causes which were involved for digital eye strain. So the posture. Now, if I'm a computer, if I'm a professional who has to be on computer for a prolonged period of time, so what is the distance and the ideal posture for me to be in front of the computer? The normal would be, I would say, you don't have to take out a scale or any measuring tape to measure this thing. You just have to stretch your hand. If you can see it, you just have to stretch your hand full, the arm and the forearm to be stretched full, and it touches the computer screen. So in a way it would, I would say, 1 arm length from your face to the screen, as if you're giving a high five to the computer screen. So that is the distance which you should be having it. Now the level, you would want to have it at your eye level. That is at times a concept that people have to keep it at the eye level. Could be accurate, could be okay for a while, but the most ideal would be to have it about, say, if this is my eye level, so have it about 4 to 5 inches below the eyes, so that you have an angulation, the eyes have an angulation of 15 to 20 degrees. So again, you don't have to really measure it. The top part of the computer or the laptop, you cannot have the laptop there, the top part of the computer, it has to be about 4 to 5 inches below your eye level. So you're just you're looking at the front, but the eyes are dipping down a little. So that would be the thing. The posture, which again becomes very important. Posture as such is not really giving any issues to your eyes as such, but the other symptoms of shoulder pain, neck pain, headache are related with the posture. So when you're sitting, supposing if I'm sitting in a chair, my feet should be properly placed on the ground. My whole foot should be properly placed on the floor. I should try to keep myself straight up. The back should be as straight as possible. I don't say a military straight, but it should be as straight as possible. Slouching position, or me more or less inclined in the chair and writing or typing that way, it would not be advisable. The having armrests would always be good, because you would want, rather than supporting your when you're sitting, the two ways that you can work: either your wrists, palm would sit on the table or on the keyboard, and your arms would be in the air, which is a less ideal condition. The more ideal condition would be that your arms are sitting on the armrest, and you have the keyboard on the table, so you're supported by the armrest of the chair, and the arms are there on the table or on the keyboard. This one is for professionals who are there, that at times, say supposing I'm looking at the computer right now and I'm typing, but I would have a lot of my reading material or literature from which I would have to tally or look into and then go back onto the screen. So a lot of times people do is they might be keeping it, the reading material, on the lap or somewhere on the side of the table, which is less ideal at times, because of the space constraints and all that, that it is something that might be needed to do. But the ideal position would be, supposing this is the screen, the ideal position would be to have the reading material either in between the screen or the keyboard, or somewhere close to the screen, so that the head movement, my head movement, should not be I'm reading the material, then I'm looking at the screen and typing. I'm reading the material, I'm looking at the screen and typing. The best is, like, this is the screen where I'm looking. If the material is somewhere on the side, I just look at the material and I go back to the screen. Look at the material, go back to the screen. So that is something. These are ergonomics to prevent or minimize as much of the professional hazards. Lightings, as we discussed, adjust your contrast, the brightness, all those things, so as the radiations are the light is producing less strain. The overhead lights, it's best to have a little dim. Again, dim. Again, please don't take it that it should be a dark room. That dark room would be better for viewing as compared to the lighted room. No. So the purpose is to reduce the glares, the surrounding glares, the overhead glares. Like as I'm sitting right now, I have these two lights, overhead lights, which are not producing glare right in front on my eyes, and not producing glare right on the screen. So that would be an ideal environment. If for some reason in an office setting, or in some reason when you cannot reduce the surrounding glares, there are always options of having these anti-glare screens to reduce the glaring effect from the screen itself, as well as the reflected glare which is coming from the surrounding areas. The blinking, the one important thing that we discussed earlier is the blinking. Do try to have a conscious effort to blink the eyes. So as I was telling you, this thing, glass thing, and the fogging of the glass, so the dryness of the cornea. So when you feel that you have this blurring of vision after prolonged exposure, prolonged seeing on the computer, tablet, or on the television, you can, if you try to blink your eyes 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and you start seeing well. So what's the logic behind it? It's just that the cornea, the black part, which is actually the transparent part, the black part which had become dry and foggy, is now wet again. So do take a conscious effort to blink the eyes so that the dryness is not there. And believe me, in a nutshell, if one were to take these precautions, these preventive measures, it would just do the full job. You wouldn't need us. It's something which is difficult to tell you that you would not need us, but yeah, if you can take these preventive measures, because even if supposing someone comes to us with these complaints that the person has these eye strains, these are the instructions that we give them. We don't give them any medications as such. At times for the corneal dryness, we do give them some lubricating drops and assisting drops which would wet the cornea, but otherwise no medical therapy, no tablets or no other eye drops that would relieve you of these symptoms. So you have to relieve yourself of the causes in a way that the prevention is better than cure. So I hope it has been a little bit useful to you in some way or the other, and I again would like to reiterate, it was a huge pleasure to be in front of you all, and the initiative which has been taken by the DPS school and the authorities, and I would say it's a remarkable effort to keep up with these online programs. I would now hand over to my wife, Dr. Sushma Bansal, who will be discussing with us on the skin and the healthcare. And maybe if the time permits, if there anything, we might be able to discuss it at the end of our discussion. So I'll ask Dr. Sushma Bansal. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Sushma Bansal. I'm a dermatologist and I care for your skin. So today I am going to talk about three things. One is how this lockdown is affecting our skin and hair. What can we do about it, and what are the home remedies which we can do at our home. So as you know, as it is necessary to stay at home these days, we are venturing out negligibly. So the routine, the schedule has gone for a toss. There have been major lifestyle changes in our schedule. So mainly being diet changes, food habits, they have changed. Second is the exercise. So I'm going to discuss these briefly, and we'll try to find out how we can sort this thing, how we can have good skin and hair. So coming to the food, I'm sure all of us, including me, we have tried almost all the recipes present in YouTube, in our recipe books. With this comes a lot of unhealthy food we are eating, and then erratic time of eatings, maybe more portion of food we are eating. So this kinds of freaks out the skin, and the skin erupts. The manifestation would be like acne, pimples. I'm sure many of you, including me, I've also faced this initially when the lockdown started. So roughness of the skin, allergic rashes, redness, irritation, itching on the skin, uneven tone on the skin. So all these things we have faced from the beginning of the lockdown. So we need to work on this. I'll let you know after a while how do we what do we do to improve the food in our daily routine. Coming to exercise, now there is very less physical activity, and exercise literally has stopped. So when we are not exercising, this stress hormones, they increase in our body. When the stress hormone increases in our body, it directly or indirectly affects our skin somewhere. So some amount of moderate amount of exercise is needed for good hair and good skin, and of course overall well-being of our body. Thirdly, sleep. We are binge watching these days. We are watching, whatever time we get, we like to be in front of the television. So the time of our sleep, the number of hours we are sleeping, they have considerably decreased. We don't get uninterrupted sleep. We don't get adequate hours, like we're not sleeping for 7 to 8 hours, which is required for good skin and hair. So sleep is something we need to work on it. Fourth is sun. So we are not going out, we are not getting our D3. Believe me, D3 is something which is responsible for a general well-being of our body, including hair and skin. So when we don't have this adequate D3 in our body, the manifestations will be, you'll feel that your skin has gone dull, dry, lusterless, it does not have glow. You will feel excessive hair loss, the shine in your hair will not be there, the hair will be very rough textured. So vitamin D3 is one of the very important components which is required by our body for good functioning. So what do we do now? How do we proceed? So I always believe that you are what you eat. Your skin and hair are what you eat. It shows on your face. How you plan your food, it shows on your face. There are definitely no miracle foods which can give you good skin, but definitely there are foods which should be avoided to give you good skin. So foods with high glycemic index like maida, sugar, processed dairy products, pasta, rice, they are high glycemic index food. Indirectly, they are responsible for breakouts, that is acne or pimples on the skin. They can give you rashes, they can give you allergic rashes on the face, on the body also. So these are the foods we should be avoiding. Taking a well-balanced diet is something we should inculcate, not during the lockdown, but in general in our family. We should inculcate in our kids from the very beginning so that they don't have to face this problem when they grow older. So a very well-balanced diet includes planned portions of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, minerals and vitamins. So for skin, we need more of proteins. We need biotin, we need skin and hair, we need proteins, biotin, we need vitamin B complex, vitamin C, omega fatty acids, iron, lots of water. So proteins for non-vegetarians is not a difficult thing. They get good amount of protein from non-vegetarian sources. But for vegetarians, we can include cottage cheese, we can include mayonnaise, we can include tofu in our diet. For biotin, biotin per se helps a lot in well-being of our hair. It increases the hair growth, it decreases the hair fall, it gives you nice texture to the hair. So it is present in lentils, it is present in carrots, almonds, cauliflower, walnuts, soybeans. So we can introduce whatever we have at home, and during this time we can try to use them wisely, using any of these ingredients in all our meals. Then vitamin C, as such it is an immunity booster, but it is very good for your skin. So citrus fruits, food, amla, guava, these are all good sources. Berries, bell peppers, they are all good sources of vitamin C. So we should increase the intake of all these things and decrease the intake of maida and all sugars. Especially, I always feel that sugar is not very good for our skin. We should always try to avoid as much as we can. Then coming to omega fatty acids. For non-vegetarians, fish is a very good source of omega fatty acids. For vegetarians, walnuts, soybeans, flaxseed, almonds, these are good source of omega fatty acids. Take lots and lots and lots of water. Please stay hydrated. Half of your problems will be solved when you take lots of water. Drink green tea. Iron is present in spinach. It is present in milk products. So you can take all these things to improve your skin and hair health. Antioxidants, if you want to take antioxidants, all the food which are high in antioxidants are yellow, red, orange and green colored foods, fruits and vegetables. We should try to take lots of them in our diet. They kill the free radicals and brings out good health in our skin and hair. Exercise. So moderate amount of exercise is required. Don't consider that working in kitchen or moving around in home is exercise. So we have to consciously exercise to improve the well-being of our body. Exercise increases the blood circulation, which in general increases the supply of oxygen and good nutrients to your skin. I'm reading the messages also, that's why I'm getting disrupted. So it gives good amount of nutrients to the skin and washes away the toxins from your body. So exercise is a must for good health. You can do dancing, you can do yoga, meditation, you can walk inside of your homes to increase the blood circulation and exercise this ways. For vitamin D3, synthetic supplements can be taken, but they should be taken under the guidance of your doctor. They should be taken after food, and because it is an oil soluble vitamin, so if you take it immediately after your meals, that should be good. For vegetarians, mushrooms and cod liver oil is a good source of vitamin D3. If you're up to eating mushrooms, it is a good source of vitamin D3. Secondly, for non-vegetarians, egg yolk is a good source of vitamin D3. So all these is something which we have at our home, and we can definitely try to introduce all this in our diet plan. Now coming to the most interesting part, home remedies. Before starting on the home remedies, I would say that please don't do any of these things if you're allergic to any of the constituents, or if you develop any itching or redness or uncomfortable feeling, please wash immediately and consult your dermatologist. So for hair fall, I have found 3-4 things which work very nicely. One is to use onion oil. We can definitely make it at home very easily. There are 2 ways to do it. One is to grate the onion and strain the juice out of it and mix it with your oil and apply in your scalp half an hour before the head bath. And the second is chop your onions in very small pieces, heat the coconut oil, saute the chopped onions, and then strain the oil. Let it cool down. I always tell my patients that whenever you have to use the oil, slightly lukewarm it. It helps in good penetration and gives a nice conditioning to the hair also. And really no need to use it overnight. If you have very dry hair and if you don't get acne, you can still use it, but half an hour of lukewarm oil does its job. Second is Kadi Patta oil. So you can use coconut oil, heat it, put a handful of Kadi Patta, let it burn a little bit, strain the oil, store the oil. Whenever you want to use it, lukewarm it and apply it. Third is fenugreek mask. So you can soak some fenugreek in night, grind it in the morning, mix with a little bit of curd, apply in your scalp. That will help in new hair growth, stop the hair fall, and it will treat your dandruff also. Fourth is castor oil. Castor oil is known to give you good hair growth. So whenever you're using it, please warm it a little bit, apply in your scalp, not on the hair. You can use on the ends if you want, but basically it is needed on the scalp. If you have time and energy, dip a towel in hot water and strain it and apply on your scalp. It will nicely condition your hair. Now for the face part, I'll again say, if you have acne, if you have rashes, redness, irritation on your skin, please don't do any of such things on your face without consulting the dermatologist. So for face, I swear by banana mask. Mash one banana, put a spoon of milk powder, and if your skin accepts honey nicely, put few drops of honey, mix it, apply on your face, leave for 10 to 15 minutes and wash it away. It gives you a nice glow. Second is curd mask. So whip the curd. If your skin accepts besan and honey, put a little bit, don't overuse anything. Apply on your face and wash off after 10 to 15 days. It works as a lactic acid peel which we give at in our clinics. So it removes your dead layers of the skin. It brings a nice shine and glow to your face. Third is curd mask. I just talked about it. And third is pumpkin mask. So just puree the pumpkin, mix little bit of egg white, whip it, apply on your face, leave it for 10 to 15 minutes and wash it off. After washing everything, please do remember to moisturize your face. If you don't moisturize your face, your skin will go dry. Do not use it all these things daily. You can use it once in a week or once in 15 days. Moisturize, stay hydrated, use a sunscreen at home. In the end, I would like to say that if you didn't have any time previously, now is the great opportunity to do all these things for you. And I would also like to thank Delhi Public School, Bhopal. They have always been on the forefront to bring about current issues and always bringing out nice sessions online, creating awareness. Thank you so much. We would like to take questions if you have any. Okay, so can banana mask be used on dry skin? Yes, it can be. It should not be used, nothing should be used on your face if it is dry, irritated, erupted with acne. Getting very dry. All the skin masks are not for all the skin types. Banana mask can suit all the skin types, but please you have to, okay, one more important thing is that you have to check before trying things on your whole face. So you can do a test on the side of your face 1 or 2 times and then only try on your whole face. Coconut oil on the face can bring out pimples if you have a acne prone skin. So please use it cautiously. Okay, so I will close the session now. Thank you so much.